Welcome to Alert and Oriented, conversations about God between friends. Join Gary Barkalow and Sam Williamson as we talk about real life with the real God, really.
About 12 years ago, I felt God call me to leave my job, and I was 50 years old, and I felt like God didn't call me to retire. And this has been a little tension between my wife and me sometimes. She'll say, Sam's retired. I'll say, I am not retired. I felt like God called me to a new career, meaning doing some kind of ministry. And I enjoy it. I was going to say I have enjoyed it like it's over. I enjoy it, but I read something a week or two ago that talked about taking what you do seriously. And it was just so convicting to me because the article that said, are you going to be a professional or are you going to be an amateur? An amateur dabbles. They show up today, but they may not be back for a week. A professional shows up every day in and day out, when it's sunny and when it's stormy. And I thought, I'm acting more like I'm retired than I'm acting like this is really what God is calling me to. I felt like I'm not taking this seriously. So I called Gary about it, because that's what Gary and I do when we have an idea or an insight. We call each other. And Gary started talking about curiosity. So how part of what we know we are is our curiosity. So Gary, I just want to toss the ball to you, but sort of the idea of taking what we're doing seriously.
Yeah, Sam, when you brought up the article you just read and the thoughts that you had about your life from the article, I mean, you didn't agree with everything they said and how they said it, but nonetheless, it stirred something. And you're telling me that stirred something in me. And I realized, gosh, I feel like the same now. At one point I was studying and writing and researching and talking to people about certain things. And I thought, I feel like I've lost that. And then I realized as we were talking, everything we've done in the Noble Heart started with curiosity. And it started with curiosity, mentioning to each other. It went into, conversations. Then it went into maybe one of these campfire conversations. It turned eventually into a conference or a seminar or a retreat that we do, with Hearing God. It turned into a book with It's Your Call, about calling into a book. And I just thought, I haven't been aware of curiosity in my life for a bit. Now, yes, we've gone through the whole COVID season. We're still in it and many things. But nonetheless, that inspired me thinking, I've got to go back and kind of get in touch with the curiosities in my life again.
Yeah, and I think the COVID season is part of I don't want to blame it. I want to take responsibility for not being serious about it. But I do think COVID was just so new. It's still new, even though it's 5 months old. It's still new to us. But I started to dabble with God, what God's calling me to, instead of taking it professionally. Now, I hate to use the word. Do you hate to use the word professional, Gary?
Well, I do, because, right, as you and I were talking, professional, you tend to think of, you have a profession where you make money. So there's a money element to it.
I'm not making money at what I'm doing.
Yeah, I know. The other side is that I remember hearing, a speaker say once, he said, as soon as we consider ourselves as Christians or call ourselves professional, he said, it kind of puts us in a position of, I don't need to learn anything. I'm the expert now. And I thought, I've just seen that so often. So there is baggage with the word professional to me.
But I still like the idea of taking our curiosity seriously. We sent out an email to people about, sort of one of the earliest examples of curiosity is Moses is in the wilderness. He sees this strange fire and he says to himself, I'm going to go over there and see why this bush isn't burning. Why isn't this bush burning? Really, God was stirring up a curiosity in Moses. And, that would be curious. And scripture, the very next verse says, as soon as God saw that Moses had turned aside, God spoke to him. And I thought that's been so true in my life so many times when, in fact, it was 10 and a half years ago. I was on a retreat with you, Gary. We called it a tribal. It was up in Colorado once.
Tribal
and I woke
gathering,
up in the middle of the night. I woke up at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and And it was awkward because I was on the upper bunk, so I had to crawl down, probably woke up my suite mate. And the thought that was going through my head was beliefs of the heart, beliefs of the heart. And I just took 2 hours to pray in the middle of the night saying, what is this about? Why is this stirring me? I didn't know. But it stirred me enough that I went home that week after the retreat and I bought the URL, believesoftheheart.com, and I started, writing. But it was this phrase that went through my mind, and all of a sudden I couldn't let it out of my mind. I couldn't let it go.
And a similar story to me is, and we've told these stories before, but, I remember working for Focus on the Family. I was a consultant for them with these other organizations around the country that we had started as affiliates, not directly as Focus on the Family, but so I would go to them and I would talk to their board of directors about, direction and strategy and how can we help them, as well as work with the executive director. But I had so many board of directors, this was quite often, they would come to me on a coffee break and say, hey, I'm going to be retiring in a year, or I am retiring, or I'm financially set, and I'm just wondering what is it I should do with my life for the kingdom full time. And that just sparked something, this curiosity. How should I speak to them about this? What are the real issues? What are the real questions I should be asking? What are they really asking or saying when they say that? And I just followed that curiosity, and it turned into working with people, turned into writing and speaking. So it was the same thing. It was a curiosity that was a catalyst into my calling.
Well, the amazing thing that I think of is the 3 examples we just gave. Moses, he's the big example, okay? He's out doing his job. He's being a shepherd. You are traveling as part of your job. It's just your job, and you're meeting with these guys, but your job was task A. Well, really what you took out of it was this B, that, your bosses didn't mean, you didn't mean, and only God could have meant. And the same thing for me. I was on a personal retreat. I was not saying, what should I do with the rest of my life? And yet in the middle of that, God stirred something. And I guess my experience of curiosities, and I bet it's true for you, but my experience is very often they come in the middle of doing something else. And in the middle of this, all of a sudden something stirs, or you recognize that it's been stirring for weeks or months or years, but it sort of comes to a head in some ways, and you realize, I need to know more about that. I can't take my mind off that. I keep thinking about it. It haunts me. It follows me. It's all these different phrases. And I think we all have these curiosities.
Right. And, one of the things I said in It's Your Call is that curiosity is often our first experience of a God-given desire in our heart. And, because you can ask somebody, what are you passionate about? What do you want? What do you desire for others or in this world that you want to be part of? And a lot of times people will be blank. I mean, I can be blank on that. But if I ask them, so what are you curious about? What do you experience from day to day, or occasionally where you think, why does that keep happening? Or why can't they get out of that? Or how can we change this, right? Some curiosity. How do people work? How does the kingdom work? And so I think, again, curiosity is a powerful guide to our calling. And therefore, as you and I talked about before the call, when we get to a point where we can't access a curiosity in our heart, we're not aware of one. We have to ask the question is, why is that true? Because I believe that everybody is curious, part of who God has made us, and it is, one of the primary ways that God clarifies or guides us into our calling. So starting with your story about feeling like, I just haven't felt, well, another word we use is compelled. I haven't felt curious or compelled about anything, deeply or strongly for a while. That was my story. I thought, I've got to get back to that again, not be so distracted that I don't realize this is what I want to study. This is what I want to understand. This is what I want to help people with.
It's a curiosity is something that's almost always with us, especially once we begin to articulate it. Like once I articulated beliefs of the heart, I saw it everywhere. I began to see it everywhere. And I think that's one of the ways we recognize curiosity. When we do retreats, when Gary and I do retreats, we have this one exercise where we just put a picture up on the screen. And we say to everybody, I want you to write down, what does this picture say? What do you see? We leave it up there 30 seconds. Then we ask people, what did you see? We'll have 30 people in the room. We'll have more than that. And nobody sees the same thing. Everybody sees something different because God has put different curiosities in us. He's put different insights into us. He's put different compellings is the word you use. And we're compelled about this. We're curious about this. But Gary, what would you say to somebody who says, I'm not curious about anything? And they're being serious. They're not being well, they might be obstinate, but they're being serious. They're saying, Gary, I'm just not curious about something. I can't think of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'd be saying, well, you are. There is something blocking. You're being aware of your curiosity, but I probably would take them back to different situations, and let's say in the past month, a meeting they were sitting in, or with a group of people, or if they happen to be at church, or they were watching something online, and just ask them, what grabbed your attention? What did you wonder about? I mean, just watching a movie. Isn't it funny how, now we can sit there with a laptop on our lap or our phone or some sort of tablet, and we can look up something right away like, I wonder what movie that person was in last, or how did they do that? Or was that a green screen? And, and it's just funny. You kind of find out, what are you Googling right now? What are you researching? But let me give you, for instance, in my life.
That's a great example, Gary. I think because I do that all the time. I'm sorry. Go ahead with your story.
Yeah. Well, so, I'm an elder at my church, and we have meetings every 2 weeks right now. We just do it after the last service that we had. And it's funny when these different issues come to the table that we have ahead of time. I know the other elders well enough. They've become good friends. We've been together for a while. So the other 5 guys, I know how they're going to think about something. When an issue comes, I know the direction they're going to go, because you can look at an issue, but there's all sorts of sides to it. And they know where I'm going to go. I know where I'm going to go. I don't really care as much about the other ones. What I care about is that those guys care about it, and they're going to come up with an answer or understand what to do. But we all are like that. You can get in a conversation with a group of guys, and after a while, you kind of know what every guy is thinking about what's being talked about. Their entry into it, their slant, their concern. And I would just take somebody back to just give me a time when you were with a number of people and you were talking about something. How did you find yourself responding or commenting differently than anyone else? I bet it was, unless they went completely silent. Then we might be going back to that blocking factor with their curiosity and everything else. I don't know. What about you?
Well, I would say, I don't know what I would say, but I think what I would say is 2 things. One is, I think God uses curiosities partly as clues to our calling. I mean, they're clues, and when you look at the story of Moses, God gave him pretty good clues about what he was calling him to do. But I think they're like 50% clues and 50% awakening. It's like Moses had blown his chance to save God's people, and he was in the wilderness for 40 years. He was dead. His heart was dead. His vision was dead. His passion was dead. And God used a curiosity to reawaken something in Moses. And so first thing I would want to say to people is look for curiosities, because I think God is using them to stir something up. And secondly, if you're not conscious of any curiosities, I'd say decide to be curious about why you aren't curious.
Yeah.
You can take some time and say, okay, why am I not curious? That's a curiosity question right there. Why am I not curious? And you can start thinking about it. You can talk about it with some friends and say, I remember when I was more curious 5 years ago, or when I was in high school or college, and talk about it with some friends. And this will waken your heart up again. It'll reawaken it, re-enliven it. So I would say look for God's awakening, but also look for curiosities.
Yeah.
You have to start off by asking yourself, why am I not curious?
Right. It's got to start there. And, another tool might be, some sort of an assist might be, I would say, if you get online and just look at, get on Amazon and start looking at books. It's just book titles. Or someplace you could go to see a number of book titles, where it's in a grid versus just one book at a time, and just start looking through them quickly and find out which book title do you see, and you stop and you need to read the subtitle now. It's kind of what we do with the picture exercise, but what grabs you? And sometimes the book title has nothing to do with the book. It's just a really good book title. So what the book is about is not necessarily the issue, but what are the titles or subjects that grab you? And then I think, you could do the same thing. You could go to one of those news accumulation sites where it has, news headlines from all sorts of sources. And the idea is just look through all the headlines and find the ones where you stop and you want to read the descriptive paragraph underneath of it. But there's a reason it stopped you for a minute and everything else did not grab your attention.
And then notice the patterns. You're not looking at the golf ones, but you are looking at the ones that have an orphan, or you're not looking at the ones with an orphan. You are looking at, whatever it is. So start looking for patterns.
Right. Exactly. I'll find myself doing that. And if it starts talking about the cultural impact on people of, for instance, COVID and the racial unrest that we're having. So it's talking about, deep discouragement or isolation or depression or something. That will grab my attention before usually a political article, and it just does. And they're both important. But I know what's going to make me and think, I want to read that article. Now, I may read one paragraph in and I'm done, but that's just another good way, I think, to stir the curiosity that's already in us.
So let's say that people, I encourage people to sort of articulate what is that curiosity, define it, or, use a couple of phrases. Like one of the things I talked about was the beliefs of the heart. That was a phrase that I started thinking about a lot of different ways, beliefs of the heart. But let's say that you now have articulated it. You have a curiosity. You've got a few different ways of phrasing it or looking at it or nuancing it. How do we take it seriously?
Well, I'll say for me, and I believe for others, is when you find that curiosity, treat it, if you will, like going back to what you said in the beginning from that article, treat it like a professional. You want to read articles, books, you want to get in circles that are talking about this subject. You want to find out, are there seminars, conferences, online things, and just go after it, get into it. So you kind of, if it truly is your curiosity and it not just is a momentary one, then dive deeply into it to understand. That's what I would say. Most of what I know on calling is because I was curious and I started digging in. I started finding out who's speaking on this, who has been speaking on this, what are they saying, and why are they saying it? And so, yeah, I think that's a secret, is treat it as a professional, and this is your profession now. You wanted to get a degree in this area of curiosity.
And then I would say you want to get a degree, but you also want to get a practice. The problem with the degree is it's intellectual, and I don't remember how many times in business we'd get somebody with an MBA and we'd say, okay, now we're going to have to teach you what business really means. We're going to have to take 3 years to unlearn you. Yeah. But I would say, do the study, read the books, attend the seminars, look up YouTube videos, but also practice it, try it, be willing to take risks, talk to your friends and say, I want to figure out ways to help the poor. I just have this passion. I want to figure out ways, and let your friends brainstorm with you and study it, think about it, pray about it, but then just sometimes do stuff, step out on the water, I think we need both. We need the head education. We also need the hand education. We need to just go out and do it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because, right, there's no testing of curiosity or knowledge until you actually do it. I mean, that's the real testing of it, right? Do I really love this? Do I really understand this? Absolutely. And it has to end up in experience anyway, or you're not actually helping people. I heard I heard a pastor today on an interview who said, the problem with the quarantining has been going on, the isolation is the three things that are so important as a Christian is faith, hope, and love. And you can grow in faith alone. You can grow in hope alone, but you cannot grow in love alone. You have to be with people. You have to connect with people. And I thought, that is so true. And it's with our calling. We have to get with people to offer to others and bless them. So that experience piece is so important.
Well, as you're saying, the faith part, yeah, we can sort of do it alone, but in a certain sense, I would say if we want to become serious about our curiosities, we need to take risk. If we always do it in our comfort zone, I don't think we're growing. You always grow where you take some kind of risk, which, with all this COVID stuff going on, I guess we don't want to talk about risk, but we have to take risks. I think that's where God is going to grow us. I mean, God tells Moses, go say to Pharaoh, let my people go. I mean, that was a huge risk. We can say it humorously, but the reality is when God calls us through curiosity, he always asks us to take some risk, to step out in faith in that.
Yeah. I think, Sam, a really good example of this idea of curiosity and pursuing it is really with you. And, you have been curious for years about the effect of culture on the church. And, that was your majors you've talked about, so many times in the past, of understanding a culture by understanding what did they believe and where did those beliefs enter into the culture that then became personal beliefs and therefore, cultural structures and behavior. And, so you are writing a book that your working title is Cultural Creep. How is a culture creeping into Christianity today? And that's been a curiosity I've witnessed in your life for years. And I love that you're writing on it now. I mean, I need to understand what you are understanding. But, there's a great example of a curiosity that turned into, your mission, your calling, the activity, the direction of your life right now.
And thank you, Gary. I mean, thank you for recognizing that and thank you for knowing that. I think what I see in your life is you were telling the story today about going to boardrooms for your job, but then board members would say, hey, I'm retiring and now I want to know what I'm going to do in the next season. And I had forgotten that was part of the initiation of your growing in love with the idea of calling. But then I know that in the last few years, you've gotten a renewed interest in helping people in their fourth quarter. Now they're seasoned veterans, they're people who have a lot of experience and knowledge. And then, the culture, speaking about culture, the culture is putting them out to pasture. No culture in the past did that. In the past, those people, those elders were the ones that we went to for wisdom, for understanding, for guidance, for direction. And now these people who are at the height of their wisdom and experience are being put out to pasture. And you want to help those people be able to be used by God, to be served, to find what their calling is in this season.
Yeah, so, it's funny. Last week or the week before, our church did 3 days of fasting and praying for a number of things, for those in the church and then for the culture. And, and it's funny, at one point, the pastor just said, I'm just compelled that we need to pray for our youth, kind of high school and, early 20s and all that's come against them. And there were a number of people, he said, you guys come on over here. And we just prayed for them, and it's so funny because as I was praying for them, I realized I didn't even see them. I didn't even notice them, but I did notice how many people were there, let's say 45 and above. I mean, that's what I saw. That's what I noticed, as I do all the time. And I wonder, how are they doing? What are they doing? And how can I get them in the battle? So, right, it's just part of me. I don't naturally notice, say, the other generational groups, but I do that one. And I think about them. Of course, I'm in that group as well, but I think about them often.
Not only in that group, it's your birthday today, Gary. I'm not going to sing happy birthday because I'm going to save everybody. But But what I think is hilarious is part of curiosity is questions. So you just said, I see the people over 45. I ask, how are they doing? What are they doing? How can I get them into battle? These are signs of curiosity. And that, to everybody else, I want to say, when you start saying to yourself, when I see this, how can I do this? What's going on? That's curiosity bubbling up inside. And you just gave a perfect example of it without even thinking. How are they doing? What are they doing? How can I get them into battle?
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of things without thinking, but thank you for recognizing that. But you know what? I mean, honestly, just saying this right now, I'm going, okay, I want to understand more. I want to talk to more people. I want to help. I want to write on this. So even this is stirring. It's stirring up my curiosity. It's already there. And we need to do that for each other, right? We always talk about the idea that we have to help others see who they really are and what God has put in them. And to be able to say, like I've seen this in you, to say to somebody, I think you're curious about, because I take note of what you talk about often, or what bothers you. Say, gosh, isn't anybody going to do something about, or will nobody speak to, or whatever that is. So we need to do that for each other.
We do. And, sometimes being curious for each other is helpful. Just like the fact that you knew what I'm curious about and I know what you're curious about. That's just really helpful for both of us, I think.
And let me throw out one other thing. And we've talked about this before, but sometimes we can get very frustrated with close friends because, they bring up something and you go, oh, here we go again, and I'm not interested or whatever, and instead of being frustrated, we should be fascinated, right? We should be fascinated of why are they so interested in that, instead of frustrated, to be able to ask them, boy, you are really drawn to understand this. You are really drawn to talk about this, to work it out or to work it in. And I think we should do that with each other, is be fascinated with each other, not frustrated like, oh, I don't want to talk about this again. I think that's how we love each other well.
Gary and I wanted to have this be a 20-minute discussion, and we've gone 27 minutes into our 20-minute discussion. And it's because I think it's a topic we're both curious about. Both curious, how do you become curious? How do you recognize your curiosities? And I encourage everyone, I guess my parting word, and then I'll let Gary have a parting word. My parting word is grab hold of a curiosity. And if you don't know what it is, be curious about it. Take some time. But I think in the next month, it's sort of like New Year really starts in September, not in January. I would say take the next month and say, what am I curious about? What do I want to grab hold of? What do I want to grab hold of so it grabs hold of me for the next year? What am I curious about?
Yeah, that's such a good idea. In fact, I'm going to take tomorrow just 24 hours off my pop-up tent trailer up in the mountains, and just to ask God to stir my heart again in areas of, what is the deepest God-given curiosity I have, or the desires that are there that I've maybe lost touch with. However he wants to do that. But I would say we've got to do that, to be curious. And the other thing I would throw out is, as you pursue the question that Sam said is kind of the first question, is, God, what am I deeply curious about that perhaps I've forgotten, or I've put away, or I've muted, or been distracted from, is to be careful not to value the curiosity. It's easy for something to come up and go, well, okay, in the scheme of things, that's not important. Pursue the curiosity. You might get to the end of it and go, you know what? I'm curious, but it's kind of more of a hobby. I just wonder about it occasionally. And then you pursue what else, or it may be, no, this is really it. But nonetheless, it starts with a pursuit of a curiosity with God, right? Listening, asking him, letting him speak in one way or another. So I would say just be careful, that you don't judge something too quickly, curiosity, as being important or not. Follow it, look at it for a while, and it may lead to either the other thing, or to find out that really is it.
Everybody, we're going to see you again next week, I think. And I bet you're curious what we're going to talk about. I'll see you then. Bye.
See you, everybody. Thanks for listening. Please join us by following this podcast or liking it, and visit our websites, thenobleheart.com and beliefsoftheheart.com, for more resources in living the eternal life with God today. You'll find articles, videos, and online classes. See you next week.